user group meeting, but we love that some of our other community members from across other locations are joining. So hello to all of you. We wanted to kind of meet a bit informal and just kind of talk about some of the upcoming features, some exciting new things, and I will share a recording and the slides after. But I have links to all the release notes areas. My name is Michelle Lane. I'm a marketing automation and operations manager with Lumaps. We sell an intranet software, and it's been a great ride with them since November, but I've been in this Pardot user group for quite a few years with Laura here. Laura is our tried and true for even longer, but it's been great leading with her, and Marcos is here as well with us. The three of us are here to answer any questions we can, and anything we are not able to answer, we'll try to find out an answer for you, but you know, we're finding out about some of these new features along with you, along your side. So there was a set that was to be released in May, and it looks they pushed it to June, June 15th to 26th. So a few of these items might already be seen in your orgs. And so it's just 4 new updates here. We'll deep dive into them. Making Pardot assets more secure and SSL enabled over HTTPS. I remember hosting a big project when this was first being delivered in, I guess, beta, and having to update a lot of things with landing pages for the HTTPS. So being aware of that as this is coming through and enabling. I don't know if Laura or Marcus, do you have any further comments or thoughts around this, but.
This one I think is ready. So I was looking at my own account yesterday and today, and this one looks like it's in the settings on the account page in Pardot. So, you know, read through the notes. It sounds like basically if you have an asset that is on a landing page, let's say your landing page is secure, but you embedded an image URL, and it's going to force the image to load from the secure version of it. That's what it sounds like. Definitely recommend trying it out in like an unpublished landing page to make sure everything's okay. But yeah, I think this one's going to be really good, especially as Chrome and everything's going to more secure versions.
Yes, and if you have a lot of assets and landing pages, I recommend making some type of documentation around it as you update everything. That really worked well for a team I was on doing this in the past.
One of the things I would add there would be, so if you're using some of those out-of-the-box layout templates for landing pages, I don't think even, because that's like coded in without the HTTPS, I don't think this would be enough to force those to do. So you probably still want to look through your code.
Good tip. All right, simple one, enabling person accounts yourself instead of having to reach out to support for it. So that's in your connector settings. Advanced email analytics. So if you've ever used the reporting on the interaction tab or email clients tabs, now anything that's 14 months or older is no longer going to show that reporting. So just kind of being aware of that, and there are specific editions that you need your Pardot to be on.
Yeah, it totally sounds like enough time to me. Like list emails, I never go 14 months back and look at, oh, what opened this? So
yeah. And then HTML will be enabled by default in any new Pardot orgs and accounts sometime between these dates of June 15th to 26th as they're releasing this. Okay, and then moving on to kind of the bigger bit coming in July. July 10th and 18th are the dates they've provided. I have a list of everything coming and a link to the direct release notes for that entire release. But let's deep dive into each here. So a big one with managing Pardot users with Salesforce. It does depend on when your account or business unit was created and if you have Salesforce user sync already enabled. So being aware of that as you do this, but that's also going to be extended with something we will talk about later with the SSO.
There also, if you are just implementing a new Pardot instance now, this had been like a recommended step, like lower in the implementation guide. Now it's like up in the top. So they're really pushing people to use user sync. So that's going to be something like Michelle talked about that we'll mention a little bit more next time. I wanted to, sorry Michelle, to really quickly interrupt. Is everybody aware of HML and what that stands for? Okay.
Some may be and some may not.
Yeah, so Pardot, when you get an older org, we use what we would call, I guess, PML. So it differs from the mail merge language that you would use for personalizing emails and stuff like that. Essentially, we got this new one called HML, which is more in line with what Salesforce uses. And up to now, it was like an optional type of thing. I just activated a new account early this week, and it's still optional. But as a week difference, literally, right? So I did it on Monday, and this is probably gonna, like, if I activate another one next week, it won't be optional anymore. So we enabled it automatically anyway because we don't want to. We want to make sure that people don't know the old way, so they don't feel like they're using anything. But that's essentially what you can use HML now on assets that before you couldn't use just the Pardot mail merge language, like on landing pages, forms, and other assets throughout the instance.
Yeah, and if you haven't used HTML yet, I highly, highly recommend it. It's very exciting. There's tons of content and blogs out there. I'm sure some of the people on this call have written blogs about it too, but some really great use cases with it. I've been exploring more and more myself recently.
One of the greatest things that it can do that the original Pardot mail merge can't do is it can detect, like, is the field blank? And if it's blank, show this. If it's not blank, use the field value. So the example Pardot likes to use is the first name. You can say, hi, Michelle, or you can just say, hi there, based on if the field is empty or not. So it's, and then you can get really complicated with the logic. And if you're a developer or coder, you can really create some really interesting customizations just using the HTML stuff in your emails. And it's rolling out to more parts of Pardot, so it's really exciting.
And then back to Marcus's comment here, kind of really pushing Salesforce user sync. Yeah, definitely be aware of that and recommend reading up on this a little bit further. Okay, if you use B2B Marketing Analytics, they are retiring some of the legacy apps. I don't have as much experience with this myself right now. I don't know if others have any comments or thoughts or questions along it right now, but they will be retiring some of the legacy apps. Laura or Marcus, do you have any thoughts?
I think this is mostly affecting the people who adopted B2B Marketing Analytics like early on. And you should have been notified about it like along the way if you're affected. So people who like got a newer Pardot account, by newer, I mean in the last like 2-ish years, I'd say you're probably not affected, but I could be a little, the date is a little in the gray area for me.
Yeah, I think you're right, Laura. It definitely is when it was used to be called Wave, and then they changed it to Einstein something, and then now B2B MA. So with this one, the way that I don't know if this is changing, but the way that they used to kind of like deliver this app was like you build an app, right, for this. And then if you wanted to update with the latest version, you actually had to like, it was almost like a sandbox and push into production. where if you did something like that, your older app would actually like just break. So I think they saw too many of that, too much of that happening. So they're probably saying we're probably just not gonna support an older app anymore and just go with whatever is newer. So that's probably where that came from.
Okay, great, thanks. There will be an upgrade to the Salesforce Pardot Connector V2, which has some improvements in instant metadata sync, business unit switcher, and the Pardot integration as a whole. To start the upgrade, you'll do it on your connectors page, and it will have step-by-step instructions.
This is, I don't know who else is looking forward to this, but this is really exciting.
Yeah.
Because the V1 connector requires you to have a connection through a Salesforce user. And smaller companies, the cost of a license is pretty expensive. So a lot of people roll it into, the marketing user or something like that. And then as the employee goes away, you disconnect you inactivate their Salesforce account, and like suddenly Pardot doesn't work anymore. So like as a consultant, you frequently recommended your clients dedicate a Salesforce license just to be the Pardot connector user, so that it didn't say like, Laura edited a link, Michelle edited a Salesforce record constantly. It said like Pardot edited it, so you could kind of see what was going on. But the V2 connector gives you a B2B integration user, and so you no longer have to burn a Salesforce license to get your connection to Pardot. And then other stuff, like if you wanted to spin up an additional business unit and switch between them, the V1 connector wouldn't let you do that. There's no ability to upgrade to get multiple business units if you're on a V1 connector. So this is really exciting, and it gets us closer and closer to more of the features that you want from Pardot inside of Salesforce.
I would say that this probably affects people more whose Pardot.org is over 2 years. And one thing that I don't have a clear answer for, but just something to think about is I do have a customer that's, enterprise, has been using Pardot for about 7 years, 6-7 years. And they're got excited about this, right? Because of all the newer functionality that they'll have access to. However, one of the things to think about is their org didn't have MC or MCR, or however you like to pronounce that word, enabled. When you do this, it may require you to have to turn that on.
That's a good point. The allow multiple users with the same email address.
Right. So for this particular client, they would hate that. And so it is like weighing in like the pros and the cons, right? So this is kind of like one of those things that is probably going to affect more. I mean, I'm gonna call them legacy clients, right? Because 2 years plus versus the newer folks won't be affected because your connectors are a B2 connector.
Yeah, and I think
if I'm wrong, the multiple records with the same email is a feature that when turned on you cannot disable, correct?
And that's been enabled for a while, right? It's more than 2 years.
June 2016. Yeah, accounts created after June 2016, AMP-C is on and cannot be turned off. But if your account is older than that, you had email as the unique identifier.
Right.
So yeah, it's a big change, but honestly, and I'll say this with like all the quotes in the world, but if you have good data and don't have duplicates in Salesforce, it's not that big of a deal. I've been on both sides of it. And as a consultant and as a user, I've been on both sides of it. And AMP-C is not as frightening as people make it sound. But yeah, that is a good point, that it will probably require you to turn on the AMP-C setting. Yeah, I totally forgot about it. Good point, Marcos.
Yeah, I can add that as a note in the slides, things like that after we're done here.
It's hard to find those older orgs these days,
And very exciting is developer sandboxes for Pardot, to be able to build things out and test them as you would in your Salesforce orgs. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. This is very, very exciting. I cannot wait on this one. I don't know there's much more to say there unless you guys have comments.
Yeah, it's still only going to be available to Pardot customers, so like non-customers don't get this. So you have to be a Pardot customer, and then you have to have a Salesforce Sandbox, and then you can spin it up from the Sandbox. So lots of people want to play with Pardot just to get their certifications, but have never been a Pardot customer before. This still isn't available to non-customers. But it's going to be huge to be able to test things. And they're calling it a sandbox. I don't know if it's going to be a true sandbox and that it could push changes to production, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah, so we actually are in the beta. One of our clients is. You unfortunately are not able to push things into production, which sucks. If you have worked as a consultant or have an account that has like a training environment, it acts very similarly, but it is a step closer to the sandbox. There is very slight like differences. And also the provisioning of it currently, again, being in beta, is a little buggy. but yeah, so excited to see, if they add some more features. But right now, there's not a whole lot of documentation, so that's probably why this slide is thinner than the other ones, because it's hard to find anybody that actually has that.
Marcos, Brandy's asking, are there differences between the developer and the training environment? Can you like name any of them?
The way that they're provisioned is different. So a training environment is like you reach out to Pardot support. They're called agency, right? Agency access, I think is what it's called. And so you end up with a little pick list next to your like account settings. I think with this one you don't get that. You actually like log into a sandbox similar to like in the Sales Cloud world. So that was one of the main ones that we noticed. It gets a little tricky when you're using like multiple business units. But in terms of you creating stuff, plugging things in, it all acts very similarly. I'm not on that particular project, so I'm just kind of like secondhand narrating here, but it seems like 9 out of 10 of the things that you used to be able to do on those training ones, now you have them. I do remember that you do have to have like the middle tier of Pardot or higher to have access to it. So that is something that is not accessible to all Pardot customers, right? You do have to be in the middle or higher, like most of the customizations. But those are some of the things that just immediately come to mind. Can definitely share more later, but not right now.
No, it's still great to hear. Okay, and then first-party tracking will be in beta to enable first-party cookie tracking from your Pardot settings, and updating your tracker domains and domain management are some of the things you have to do to get this going. They have added this so you don't lose prospect activity data. As we all know, a lot of the browsers have had a lot of updates when it comes to this. This will give you more flexibility in campaign attribution because of tracking some more of that data, and help to block more traffic that doesn't come from your domains. I even think, Laura, you mentioned something you saw today about helping to block more bot traffic as well.
There's something on the roadmap, yeah. So that's going to be for email bot clicks, but this one is specifically to address some things Mozilla browser and Chrome browser are doing to increase. I think it's so funny that like Chrome, owned by Google, whose like business model is based off of selling our personal data, is like leading the way and giving us more privacy on the internet. But basically the idea is that for internet privacy and probably GDPR related things, your browser is going to block tracking cookies that do not originate from the same domain as the website you're on. So if you're visiting www.pardot.com, if the cookie does not come from a pardot.com, that's a bad example because all of Pardot's cookies are pi.pardot.com. If you're visiting salesforce.com, the cookie is served up by Pardot.com. That would be third party, even though, you know, Salesforce owns Pardot, the cookie is not served off of a Salesforce.com URL. It's a third party thing. So with this change, you would be the one attaching your website domain, the company.com part of your website, to the Pardot tracking cookie. So it's going to like mask, I say with finger quotes, it's going to basically mask the domain and make it look like it's being served up from your website so that you're not inadvertently blocking any of the visitor activity from your website.
Yeah. So any questions or thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's a beta, so that's very exciting.
Yes, and I have the link to sign up here as well. So that will be interesting to try out. So I encourage you to sign up. And then reusing snippet API names. So for HTML, although HTML relies on a unique identifier to render values in an asset, it can now differentiate that. This is more for business units, correct?
Sort of. So it has to do with, you have to have Pardot Lightning and you have to have connected campaigns.
Yes.
But basically it lets you reuse pieces of a campaign. So if you have, for example, a webinar and your campaign always has these same things, you could copy a Salesforce campaign and everything associated with the campaign would copy. And you can use snippets embedded across different parts of your campaign. So in Pardot terminology, we would most equate it to like dynamic content, but it doesn't have to change based on a field value. It's just like if a webinar always has a paragraph that says like this, you can reuse that paragraph over and over and over with one short little HTML embed code. And if you update that snippet in the Pardot Lightning app, it'll update it everywhere that snippet is used across your campaign. So if you embed that snippet on a landing page, on a form, on an email, it'll update it all the way across everywhere. And this will make it reusable, basically. So API name is kind of a Salesforce terminology, and snippets are spun up in Salesforce, so this kind of makes sense. But you would be able to use the API name for different automations, basically. Not a lot of people have played with snippets. I personally have not, so it's going to be kind of exciting to see what people come up with, what snippets can do.
Yeah. And then screenshot Pardot API, so separate API piece here, new and changed items. So there's a couple items with exporting the API, visitor activity. Now you can query on updated date, and authentication using Salesforce connected apps. I am not aware of much around these, and I don't know if others have some comments here.
So the Pardot API is exciting, but unless you're a developer or have a developer on staff, you don't tend to do a lot with it. Marcos has a teammate who's the Pardot API guru, and kind of Marcos, Mike Cruiser is our good friend. He loves questions. So if you have questions about the API, can the API do this? Send them to Marcos.
Yeah, I do have one thing to comment on this last bullet that Michelle put. So for a lot of us, we tend to use like Pardot, only users for applications like Qualified or Drift or metadata, Hushly, anything that you need to essentially log in to Pardot, plug it in, and then you kind of forget it, and just occasionally check to make sure that is working. So with this, this is going to change. The details around this are still a little bit fuzzy. So essentially, you're still going to be able to have Pardot only users, but you're supposed to get what is called an identity license that's going to be bundled to help transition better. So it's almost like it's a license that you apply to a person. They don't have access to Sales Cloud, but it allows you to do the same thing as now. So you, from my understanding, is you will have up to a year from this next release to just review your instance and make those changes. Right now, Pardot has not communicated how many of those identity licenses you're going to get per org, or how to get more if you need more, right? Some enterprises have 10 plus, Pardot only users for specific integration. So this may be something to look at. We, on the spot for Pardot, we did publish a blog yesterday. So here's my shameless plug. And we talk about that. Okay, cool. Yeah, we talk about that that process a little bit more. Details are still unraveling. So if you have questions, I would refer you to that resource because it's easier to understand than going through all the notes. But yeah, feel free to follow up if you have any other questions on that.
And these API changes are, the Pardot API is kind of like old. It's not new technology. It's really hard to use, and it doesn't expose a lot of data that people would find useful as a developer. So all of these changes that are on screen and that are coming in the near future, they are in support of making the Pardot API like new and upgraded, and kind of behind between you and I, it's all about like Salesforce acquired MuleSoft, and MuleSoft is all about APIs. So somebody somewhere said, hey, Pardot, you need to have a better API. Make it happen. And then these are all the changes we need as Pardot users to make a better Pardot API so we can do more with it. So a lot of stuff is kind of unknown right now, but it's in support of better stuff.
Great, thank you guys. Easier setup for B2B Marketing Analytics. So I know we talked about a little other BBMA stuff earlier. Here's some more on basically a guided step-by-step walkthrough. I believe very similar to how you enable Lightning in your Salesforce org. Just kind of walk you through toggling things and getting it set up. A little screenshot of it. And then Pardot and Salesforce campaign data side by side. So this is more B2B MA. Basically, I'll just go straight to the screenshot for this one. A good way to view it is on one of your dashboards in your analytics studio there for B2B MA. You can have your ROI from your campaigns while also using the Pardot engagement factors side by side on your dashboard there. So that's one of the examples. Yeah, I don't know that I have more on that. Do you guys have any further comments or thoughts? Okay. And then access and customize Pardot data flows. So another B2B MA item as well. There's, I think, a screenshot here. Yeah. So you have more access for some of the items that you're able to create and customize here in a little easier route than it used to be. Because now it's on the Connect tab, create a new data connection with the Salesforce local. I don't know that I have more information around this since I haven't messed with it as much. Laura and Marcus, I don't know if you have more thoughts. But.
The only thing that I'll say is that, so essentially when you bought Wave, you had this much flexibility. They turned to BMA for Pardot and it went like this. And then they said, oh, if you wanted to go back here, you can buy a full like Einstein license. So it runs on the same like processing part. This is just like a smaller, a more direct way of marketers interacting with data, right, than somebody that's more of a data analyst and stuff like that. So this is good, right? Like we're getting access to more data points, which means we were probably going to get maybe one or two additional like out of the box dashboards that we don't have to configure. And this gives us a couple of new items to do, including that visitor ID. So maybe making that possibly underwhelming visitor report that we have in Pardot, right? And maybe giving it a little bit more life. I think this is great. It's a step definitely in the right direction.
Yeah, very true. Good thought on the visitor report, that's for sure. Okay, and a similar concept to that, but adding engagement data on opportunity records. So I think, yeah, a screenshot here to be able to see how things are performing in campaigns on your opportunities, to see, you know, what campaigns should you weight more heavily moving forward and repeat. AI enhanced attribution data as well on campaigns. I believe, yeah, I do have a screenshot with that. Using the Einstein attribution setup assistant to do this, and you can use a customized model created by Einstein to identify most effective campaigns in customer journeys. So here is an example of a multi-touch attribution set up with some of the AI enhanced attribution there. Marcus or Laura, do you have any further thoughts or comments with this as well?
I think it's part of an overall trend. You know, Salesforce is definitely diving deep into Einstein and pulling Pardot to be able to see Pardot data and Pardot enhancement and campaign data, like pulling Pardot more on platform. Like this is kind of a logical next step. They've definitely been pushing multi-attribution. You have to have these more advanced tools like Einstein and B2B MA in order to really dig into it. But I think it's a really, like we've all kind of agreed that like Pardot's reporting is like the barest bones reporting and it's not big enough. So this is kind of just more stuff that's exciting to see. And it's come a long way because like the original AI stuff about campaigns could tell you like, well, this email was opened by a lot of people with this sort of job title in Germany, but it couldn't necessarily tell you anything more than that or suggest like an actionable thing. This is like the next steps towards getting it actionable. So like, if that's true, then we recommend that you send them an email that recommends them to watch this video or something. Like that's kind of the holy grail that we're hoping to move towards. Not there yet, but getting there.
A different angle from something that I heard probably like in Dallas at the World Tour last year, was that, so, you know, they've been trying to put Einstein on everything, right? Like it started with voice recognition, then it started with like this B2B MA and the thing with the wave. Now there's like Einstein activity capture, all these different Einstein products. One of the things that got me kind of excited just from, you know, I used to work for another partner that it was more marketing execution, right? We used Pardot, Marketo, all this other stuff. So one of the, when I'm going with this particular piece that Michelle has was that Safe Harbor, that they were supposed to use like AI to help you not only do some of this attribution, but also pick up on like almost like your keystrokes. So like, let's say you are sending like 15 emails out, right? Like let's say your newsletters, right? Well, when you start, you see how like when you start a sentence and Google it tries to autofill it for you, it's supposed to be doing the same thing for like subject lines, right? It was supposed to be this really like small piece. Now again, Safe Harbor, I don't know if they're even considering that anymore, but that's where I had heard that they were going to try to take, you know, pieces of the platform, and then this seems to be, you know, almost a direct link to, you know, email campaigns. So it's exciting that they're starting to think, and obviously reporting is where most people care about, right, at the end of the day. And so yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the additional thoughts behind that. Okay, so an exciting thing within Salesforce, and specifically on individual records or on list views, they're going to start adding some Pardot actions there. Right now, it will be add to Pardot list or add to an engagement studio. So this is super powerful because at the moment you could, I believe, was it solely in campaigns that you could add to Pardot list. So now this will be expanding. You don't have to have people in a campaign. You can do it on your list views anywhere or on the record of the person directly. So that's very exciting.
And if anyone watched the webinar I watched earlier today, that was like the, what was it called? Like release readiness today. It was kind of an interesting webinar, but they showed a recording of how this is going to work. And it looks very much like a Pardot list, which is like you check the boxes and you choose like add to list. And if you choose add to engagement studio list, it's actually just going to show you like the subset of lists that are used on engagement studios. And when you select that list, it'll show you this list is used on this engagement studio, or if you use that list on multiples, it'll show you which ones it'll add the person to as a result of adding them to that list. So that's exciting.
Great, yeah.
Now, this was an interesting one because you can already add a visual force page and make lists here invisible. So if you just have a strong naming convention, you could already do most of this, right? So that was just like, this is just, I guess, bringing it into the new century of Lightning, right? Maybe a detail that was forgotten.
Yeah, very true. Okay, and now back to kind of part of the login part with SSO, and I might just let Marcos take over here, or Laura too. With some of the slides you have.
Just a couple. So you guys probably all saw in your Pardot accounts an alert talking about like you're going to, in spring 21, not be able to use your Pardot only users to log in. This is, and the dates that they've put out, they say are subject to like COVID changes and stuff. But basically, as marketers, we all kind of know that Salesforce licenses are expensive. We don't always get a seat in a Salesforce license. So maybe they provide like a general marketing login that marketing shares, but then you can give your marketing people all sorts of Pardot only licenses, Pardot only users rather, because they're free. And then also best practices are that if you need to connect Pardot to another tool like Zapier or I use FeedOtter, Marcos, you named like a bunch of apps. We use Uberflip at my work. And if any of those tools have the ability to like add users to your database or have the ability to edit fields in your database, you don't want to use your own Pardot user because then it looks like Laura edited all those records or Marcos edited all those records. You would normally spin up a Pardot only user, connect it to that app, and then it looks like, oh, Uberflip edited this user or Uberflip created this user. So now you know where that person came from or what most recently edited. You can also see in the API usage table like what apps are accessing Pardot. So this is a big change because it's going to mean, if you go to the next slide, Michelle, I think I've got a screenshot there. So this is the traditional view that we get with logging in at pi.pardot.com. The bottom half that we normally use as Pardot users, and you know, it's our favorite tool to log into Pardot Classic, that part is going to go away and you're going to be left with only that top part for login with Salesforce. And then the question is, do you need to buy Salesforce licenses to enable marketing users to log into Pardot? And the answer is maybe, and it comes to this identity user thing that Marcos talked about earlier. So we go one more slide. Basically, Pardot has never been a pay per license model. And they kind of said, I was on like kind of a small webinar, they kind of said like, we're not going to a pay per license model. And they can't, basically. They're priced similarly to other competing products, which all are priced based on like the number of database seats, not the number of users you have. So what they're saying is that they're going to issue some Salesforce identity licenses. And this is basically like if you go to LinkedIn or some other apps and it asks you, do you want to log in with your Google account or do you want to log in with your Twitter account? Like it's the single sign-on concept using Salesforce. So normally identity is priced at like $5 per user, and it just basically lets you log into other Salesforce apps. But Pardot's going to be issuing some. That number is not established yet, and it's probably going to vary based on what Pardot pricing model you have. But what they have said is that the number they're going to issue is going to cover like 90% of Pardot accounts. So if you have 100 Pardot only users, yeah, you're probably going to have a problem. But if you have like, a few, you might be covered. We kind of don't know, and they don't know either, is what it's coming down to. And then it is going to, do I have one more slide? Yeah, so there's going to be a few changes leading up to it. So that alert that you saw in your Pardot account is like the first notification. In this summer 20 release that's coming up, they're going to have updates to the Salesforce User Sync tool, because they are going to recommend Pardot Salesforce User Sync as like the primary way people log into Pardot. And they know that it has some ways to go in order to be like the optimal thing that they should recommend, because there are some bugs with it still. The Pardot API in summer 20, you are going to be able to log into the Pardot API using a Salesforce user with SSO turned on. And like to date, you can't log in with a Salesforce user license. So this is kind of a big change. You had to have a Pardot URL, sorry, a Pardot user. In winter, they're going to improve the way that you enable SSO on your Pardot users. Right now, it's kind of clunky. And you're also going to be able to toggle a field on the user table and see which of your Pardot users are SSO enabled and which are not. And then they're saying that they're going to cut off the Pardot only users in the spring 21. They specifically called out February, but they also specifically said that may well change due to COVID shutdowns across the world. So this is big changes. They're trying to give us a lot of notice. And it is going to be somewhat handled by granting us these identity users. But like for myself, I know that I'm going to burn at least 3 identity user licenses just for things that I log into. Or I may go to the less desired model of like everything logging in under my user. We'll kind of see when we get there how many were granted and what all is going on. So that's all.
Great. Well, that was all as a whole too. So if there's any other questions, please let us know. Again, we will post the recording, the slides, might try to add some notes based on some of the great comments and tips here, but so excited you all could make it today with us. But feel free to stay for a few minutes if you need with any other questions.
Yeah, who's got questions?
Well,
anybody excited about anything in particular in the sessions, in the upcoming releases? I'm excited for SSL. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm excited for people to adopt snippets a lot more. So I can see creative uses for them, because right now I'm stuck with like 5, and like I can't think of anything else. So I hope somebody else, can come in here and use that. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Orlando. Appreciate it. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. You too, Heather. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it.
Yeah. If anybody has ideas you want us to cover for future sessions, please send us an email. We're on Twitter. You can just send an email through the Trailblazer community group, post a message, whatever. If anybody's got requests for sessions, we'll try and deliver, or we'll try and call in an expert. If it's something really, really niche, let us know.
We can also answer just general Pardot questions. They don't have to be about this particular presentation.
Yeah, that's true. If you're stuck on something and want to screen share something, we can totally answer a question for you. Anybody?
Everyone's just too excited, too much information.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's exciting how much Pardot's releasing lately. I'm excited to see.
Well, I do for definitely for the recording and anybody that joined us. I do want to thank everybody who is like not even in the U.S. who joined us for this particular session. Hopefully, we see you in the future. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us know, right, if there's anything that you guys are working on that we can help amplify for you over Twitter. Happy to to share with other like-minded trailblazers. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We should have a recording distributed in the near future.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we call it?
All right. Well, thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.